CinemaJaw is sponsored by Overcast, an independent podcast app that embraces the open world of podcasting instead of locking it down. No exclusives, no premium content, no paywalls. Just a great podcast app for everyone. Get it for free in the App Store. And we thank them for their support. You're listening to CinemaJaw Retro Reviews, recorded on location from our respective homes in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye the movie guy, and sitting inside the fish tank is Fill Me In Phil.
Hello.
This week on CinemaJaw, Matt, a retro review of Muriel's Wedding in honor of Toni Collette month.
Is this a rewatch for you, Ryan, or was this your first toe in the water?
First time watching Muriel's Wedding. You?
Ditto. Yeah, first time. And I didn't even know it existed before we started celebrating Toni Collette this month.
This was one of the films that I do and did know that it existed. I'd see it pop up from time to time, and I always needed that excuse to watch it. I would see it and think, someday I'll see it. And I knew that it was Toni Collette, and it was sort of the movie that jump-started her career. That's all I really knew. And obviously it had something to do with a wedding from the title.
Yeah, hence the title.
Yeah, but that was about it. And then once we started celebrating Toni Collette, I knew that had to be the movie we checked out was Muriel's Wedding.
Yeah, not only noteworthy just for that, though. A lot of people really love this movie.
Oh, for sure. We're going to get into it, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Plus, Phil's got some internet facts that he's researched on the film. So we're going to really dig deep on Muriel's Wedding.
Well, why not get it started right now, Ryan? To think it all started at a wedding, Muriel's Wedding, the film that would launch Toni Collette and her co-star Rachel Griffith's careers. It's been 27 years since the film's release, and it's fair to say a lot has changed in the world, especially recently. Is this the classic we remember? Does it still pack a punch, or has age faded this film? Ryan and I headed to Porpoise Spit to check out the reception.
Muriel Heslop had a dream.
Looks like I'm next.
To get married. Only one thing stood in her way.
No one's ever going to marry you. You've never even had a boyfriend.
Muriel's on the doll.
You never wear the right clothes. You mental case! You keep away from us!
Reality.
Muriel lives a life with a total lack of agency. Her sense of worth is shattered by a corrupt politician of a father who constantly belittles her, her mom, and her siblings. Her friends are no better, kicking her out of the friendship just for not being pretty or popular enough. Her community also looks down at her as the film opens with her arrest for a dress she may have stolen. She's sold out to the cops by an obviously judgmental department store detective who comes back to haunt again later in the story. Desperate for a sense of belonging, when her mom hands her a blank check to help get her business started, she instead steals the family fortune to finance a trip to follow her so-called friends to a tropical resort. There she meets Rhonda, and her life slowly begins to change. But it isn't until Muriel accepts responsibility for her past mistakes that real healing can take place. Rye, I went into this movie, like I said at the top, totally in the dark. I knew that this was the movie that launched Toni Collette's career, like you knew, and roughly that it was a comedy. Throughout the first act, I was thinking, okay, so this is a broad comedy with a bit of a dark family relationship undercurrent. After all, the town name Porpoise Spit sort of sets the tone for silliness, and the opening scene is straight out of a Wes Anderson playbook. However, as the second act wraps up and the third act begins, there's a dramatic shift in tone. And that's when Muriel's Wedding gets really good. Some very unexpected emotional heft pops up. Deceit, betrayal, suicide, reconciliation, but most of all, agency. I was very happy to see where this film ended up, and I have to admit, I didn't think it would get there until nearly its final moments. Although a wide brush is liberally used from scene to scene at times in this picture, I have to say the relationship that builds up between Muriel and the swimmer works, but it feels a little rushed. I would have liked to have seen exactly how she won him over, but maybe that's besides the point. I'm not so sure, though, given that the name of the picture is, after all, Muriel's Wedding. Also, Muriel's siblings, I hardly knew their names. It would have been nice to let those characters get a little fleshed out. But in the end, I hope that many of the attitudes portrayed in this film have changed. I still know a lot of people, unfortunately, live through situations like Muriel and Rhonda in Porpoise Spit. And so the film is still a true escape, and it's still a true classic after all these years.
Yeah, I do think it is a classic. It was a total joy of a film. And to just see where it all started for Toni Collette, it's an eccentric character. And I found that very fitting for the Toni Collette I know and have seen on screen through the years. I did have a little trouble remembering the fact that all the ABBA music was actually an original idea back in 1994 when this movie came out. Seeing it now, post Mamma Mia and several other films that use ABBA songs,
Eurovision,
just last year, it seems almost cliche. But let's be honest, Muriel's Wedding helped launch that whole idea of using these songs. What a group of losers Muriel's brothers and sisters are. You alluded to them that you didn't think they were fleshed out enough. At one point, her father says, "You're all useless." And you touched on it. I love the start of the film. Muriel catches that bouquet of flowers, and all her friends start to yell at her for catching it because they know that Muriel is not worthy of being married. There's no way she can, quote unquote, find a husband. And if that wasn't bad enough, yes, the cops are called on her because she stole a dress she's wearing. Hilarious. I thought it set the tone for the movie we're about to see. You touched on the fact that it changes tonally somewhere between that second and third act. And you're totally right, because Muriel's Wedding, the title, and the idea that the swimmer and the boyfriend, Bryce, who's that boy that she meets at the video store, is presented. I 100% thought this was going to be one of those where she realizes, oh, the swimmer isn't for me and I should go to Bryce. And
sure.
the film does not go there. It sidesteps all of that, which is fantastic.
I agree. That's what I meant when I said the film winds up being about agency. Because if it had just been like she chooses one of the guys or she learns a lot about herself and everything's okay in the end, no, that would have sucked. She has to repent for her lies and fix the relationship with her dad and finally take responsibility for her own actions in order to end the story. And I didn't think it would get there either, dude. I really didn't. And luckily it does.
I also want to say the film cements its place on the list of funniest sex scenes in movies. Yeah. It takes place when Muriel brings Bryce back to the apartment. Now, her roommate, Rhonda, at this point has already been back there with two guys that she's picked up at a bar. Yeah. And you got all this noise going on, which is hilarious. But then Muriel is wearing these ridiculously tight black leather pants. And Bryce goes to unzip them at one point, and he actually grabs the zipper of the beanbag that she's sitting on and unzips the beanbag. And the way Toni Collette laughs at this, her reaction makes that entire scene work. I mean, just hysterical.
It is hysterical. That's the shift, by the way. That is the scene after which the entire movie pivots. Yeah. It was really funny. Like, I didn't know if she was being tickled, if she was like so embarrassed that she had this laughing fit, but it was memorable.
It was. And overall, Muriel's reactions were pretty fantastic. I love her face when she's walking down the aisle, because she does marry the swimmer guy for reasons of keeping him in the country. He's from South Africa.
Right. A marriage of convenience.
Right. And so he's convinced, all right, he's going to marry Muriel, and she actually gets this wedding. And she walks down the aisle, and while she's doing that, she's making these very quirky but genuinely happy faces at all the different people in the church. At that point, Matt, maybe I'm off my rocker here. She actually reminded me of Drew Barrymore a bit there. And I don't think Toni Collette and Drew Barrymore ever really cross over. But to me, at that moment, she reminded me of Drew Barrymore.
Well, I'm not sure where you're getting that from, if I'm being honest. Just the cheese eating grin.
Yeah, and that like sort of quirkiness, like when she was like making almost like silly faces because she's so happy. She's not necessarily just smiling; she's sticking her tongue out and those kind of weird things that a girl would do that Drew Barrymore would also pull off.
Well, I think what we learn is Toni Collette has had this incredibly expressive face dating back to the beginning of her career. I suppose you could say she was born with it, Rye.
I agree. Also, the film had some sight gags that were pretty damn funny. My favorite of which I wrote down here was when Muriel is with her so-called friends on this vacation, and one of her friends says, "Let her finish her orgasm." And then they slowly pan over and they're talking about the drink that she's having, which was really popular in the 90s. There would be these like orgasm drinks, they would call them, or people had all these ridiculously sexed up titles for drinks. Mm-hmm. I love that kind of stuff. It fit perfect.
Yeah, I know. That was a good sight gag. The whole thing in Hibiscus Island, full of great times and great broad comedy.
What'd you think of the chemistry between Muriel and her friend Rhonda?
I thought it was good. I thought it was genuine. Speaking of lookalikes, though, I have to say for Rachel Griffith, I had to pause the movie and just do a double take that I wasn't Juliette Lewis.
Oh, yes.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Totally. No, yeah, you're onto something there.
With the hair and everything, but she was great. I mean, I think she was also really praised for this movie. Won, at least nominated for a couple of awards, not Academy Awards, but some of the, let's call them
smaller ones.
Yeah, some of the smaller ones.
Yeah, I thought their chemistry really sells the movie. It's like you could tell these were two actresses that really got along.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
All right. One big question for you. You go ahead.
No, I want to ask you this question. What do you think of my criticism about the relationship between her and this Olympic swimmer? Like at first when they get married, and spoiler alert, we're just going to talk about this movie. It's 27 years old. When she first gets together with him, he has contempt for her. Who would marry somebody for money? And she's like, well, you did. And then slowly there's this one scene where he's swimming and he looks up and she's watching TV, and you could tell from that scene that maybe the ice was melting with him. But then the next scene goes straight to like him being there for her in a really vulnerable moment. And then they have a love scene together where they consummate the marriage. And it was like, where'd that come from? Don't get me wrong. I like it, but I would have liked to have seen how that developed.
Well, I mean, granted, we're talking about the whole movie is done in about an hour and 40 minutes, right? So nothing is given too much time here because it is a comedy, but I thought there was a little bit more there. I believed that he was starting to fall for a little bit in the sense that he was starting to see her true character, and he liked all the quirkiness that Muriel had. I think Muriel, her character in general with most people would be off-putting when you first meet her. But once you got to know her, I think most people would start to like her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
fair. And I think that was the case with the swimmer. I think right away, hey, he's doing this because he needs to. And he meets her and she's quirky and he's just like, forget it. Doesn't matter. I just need to marry her. But then once he's talking to her a little bit, he starts to be like, oh, she's actually a lot of fun to hang out with. And he starts to have feelings for her.
Right. I'm not asking for you to explain how it works.
I'm saying it worked for me a little bit, but I mean, they had to rush that. Again, the whole movie is only an hour and 40 minutes, and this is a small part of it.
What I'm saying is if they had put that scene in, maybe one more scene where she does something that warms him up more to her, instead of it just being that one look up from the swimming pool, and then the next time they get together, he's totally ready to do it with her. Could that have made the movie stronger?
I don't know, because I will say, because of how they did play it out, I was under the impression that they may end up together at the end.
I'm so glad that didn't happen as well.
And so am I. And so, but I was like literally not sure exactly what was going to happen. If you were going to say I'm talking even with like 15 minutes left in the movie. If you were going to ask me what was going to happen, my money bet would have been on she goes with Bryce, the boy that she liked.
And that's so rare in a movie for a couple of seasoned moviegoers like us who have no idea where the story's going to go until the last moment.
That would have been my money bet. Then if I had to make a backup bet, I would have said she would have went with the swimmer.
Totally.
And in reality, I would have lost all my money here because neither of these things happened.
I know, which is, I think, why this movie is so good.
I agree. It's very refreshing. So the ABBA stuff, like I mentioned, that this really did kick off the love, the revival of ABBA to a large degree. Now we're watching this in 2021 using the ABBA songs. Yeah, it's everywhere. There's been musicals. So I found it very hard. It's one of those things almost like when you're watching something where the source material predates so many things it influenced, but then when you're finally watching something, you're like, oh, well, this is just like,
right. We're the ones that are late to the party on this. Exactly.
And did you have any problems with that? Because I caught myself actually writing in my notes too much ABBA, but then I was like, right, this happened before the explosion of ABBA. This was the reason why it happened.
Well, I'll say this. There were a couple of ABBA moments where I was like, man, they are using it too much. But I love ABBA so much that it was fine. Like I can listen to Fernando again,
Mm-hmm. My big question for you was, did the movie put too much of an emphasis on the focus of getting married for women?
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the point.
Mm-hmm.
That is, again, if this movie had ended in any other way, I would have been angry with it because it's a terrible message for the first hour and a half. That really the only thing that's going to make Muriel's life worth living and give her success, which is a word they use in the movie, is for her to get married. It doesn't even matter about love. When she finally does get married, nobody cares whether or not they're in love. It's just that they got married. And all her friends finally accept her and everything is like looking up for Muriel. And I was like, damn, that is a terrible message. But I think that that's the point of the movie, that they were turning that on its head.
Agree. And you really see that with her friends because right from the beginning, we see that her friend is getting married and the husband's cheating on with another friend. And then there's a very funny conversation midway through the movie where everybody sort of lets all the dirty laundry fly, where I've been with this guy and back and forth, and nobody's being honest or faithful with anybody.
Yeah. That is a really funny scene.
It was good stuff. So there was a question I proposed to you when we're doing these retro reviews. It seems like nowadays Twitter always goes crazy with certain movies. It could be maybe a political message. It could be something that everybody gets hung up on. Who knows what? But Twitter goes crazy with movies. What would the Twitterverse be talking about after Muriel's Wedding came out if it had come out in 2021?
Well, I mean, I think it would be talking about how this is a takedown of the whole institution of marriage and the patriarchy and stuff like that. But I actually wrote a few like sample tweets that don't necessarily
sample tweets. I like this, Matt.
They don't necessarily have anything to do with that broader message. That's what I think the Twitterverse would be buzzing about because it tends to get political at times. But I think from people like us, we would have been saying like newcomer Toni Collette makes us ask Elsie Fisher who in the new coming of age drom-com Muriel's Wedding. Oh,
got to have a hashtag in there. Well done.
What do you think the Twitterverse would have been? I got another sample tweet for you, but
okay. So I agree. I went a little bit with TikTok. There's probably ABBA TikTok videos out there, quite a few now, but I think you would have seen an explosion after Muriel's Wedding where ABBA TikTok was on the rise big time. And I think the Twitterverse would have had a lot of hatred for Muriel's friends who dumped Muriel and were very, very shallow.
Well, interestingly enough, that leads me to the next sample tweet I wrote, which is a revenge on the hashtag Mean Girls trope, a roller coaster with emotional loop-de-loops.
Nice. Yeah, I like that you're practicing your tweets on us. This is great.
Yeah. I got one more.
Oh, hit us.
Last tweet. Here we go. Best use of ABBA since Eurovision.
For sure. I love it. All right. Was there a jaw-dropping moment in Muriel's wedding for you? Because I got one.
There's a few, but I'm going with the sex scene. That was just such a hilarious scene. The two sailors run in butt naked, and she kicks her boyfriend through a window, and there's a lot going on in that scene.
It's hysterical. My jaw-dropping moment was actually seeing Toni Collette on screen for the first time. Completely different. I mean, she put on weight for the role, I know, but her hair looks different. She's just heavier set. I actually had a back and forth with myself. I'm like, that's Toni Collette. No, it's not, kind of moment, you know?
Me too. Same.
And I was like, wait, it is Toni Collette. I'm like, this is bizarre. It's like a, you know, weird version of Toni Collette. I just wasn't ready for that.
By the end of the movie, it's totally Toni Collette. But for the first few scenes, it's like, what? And maybe it's partially that weight, but she was also, the character is still finding herself. You don't see Toni Collette come through till about the third or fourth scene.
All right. I like to do top tier, middle tier, bottom tier. Okay.
Yeah.
And I only threw three things in there for, you tell me if it's top tier, middle tier, or bottom tier. We're starting with Toni Collette. Where do you put this?
So there's a few Toni Collette movies I haven't seen, which I know are her bottom tier, but just about everything I've seen her in is top tier. This is top tier, top tier Toni Collette.
I'm going to agree with you. Top tier Toni Collette. This is up there with like Hereditary, Sixth Sense. I like About a Boy. You can throw a lot of those in there where you're like, yeah, that's top tier Toni Collette.
Knives Out. I mean,
I'd put Knives Out middle tier, but that would be me. Yeah.
No, I'd put it top tier.
Okay, so you're just throwing everything top tier for Toni Collette.
No. Like I said, there are a bunch of movies that she did that I haven't seen that I have to assume are the middle and bottom tier, because all the ones I've seen, she's top tier almost every time.
All right, for ABBA in a movie, is this top tier, middle tier, or bottom tier ABBA?
Well, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, how this may have been the originator of the whole ABBA trend. But that being said, I have to call this middle tier, maybe even the lower middle tier of ABBA.
I was going to go upper middle tier of ABBA.
Right, we're on the same page.
So did you buy the whole, the big ABBA moment where they do the karaoke in the bar?
That was fine. Yeah, that was actually great. That was a triumphant moment. I love the song Waterloo. It's probably my favorite ABBA song. It's great.
Wedding movies, middle tier, top tier, bottom tier.
That's interesting, because as much as the title would suggest and the character's obsession with weddings, it's not necessarily the main point of the movie. So I'm going to say middle tier.
Boy, we're agreeing way too much. I got middle tier for wedding movies as well, and more or less the same thought process. Yes, it's in the title, but there's movies out there that really concentrate on the whole sacrament of marriage and the goofiness of it all and familyness of it all.
When we did wedding movies recently, right, within the last couple of years, did Muriel's Wedding come up on the guests list? Because obviously it would have come up on one of ours.
No, it was definitely a blind spot.
Who was that? Who did we do that with?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll go one step further. I'm positive Muriel's Wedding has never come up on CinemaJaw, even from a guest's on the list of a guest.
I wouldn't. Don't be so positive. But
I got a pretty good memory, and I write a lot of movies down. And I don't remember thinking, yes, I'm shocked that the guest brought up Muriel's Wedding. May have happened, but maybe once. My guess is it's never come up.
Well, let's ask Phil if we can see when we did wedding movies, kind of throw it in the fish tank, and just put in Muriel's Wedding in the search on the cinemajaw.com and see if anything pops up.
Tricky. All right. Speaking of Phil, he did a bunch of internet research on Muriel's Wedding. So let's open up that fish tank.
Wait a moment! It's fish! Isn't it?
DC! Wake up!
No, Pat, it's a giant glass bowl. Hey, get some fish folk.
Who's coming with me besides Flipper? Here.
That's a Sicilian message. It means little Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
You
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. As always, I try to do my best. I try to find the most accurate and the most, scintillating information I can.
Ooh, scintillating.
It might be the wrong word.
No,
Scintillate
but
us.
it's
what I use.
Scintillate us.
Yeah. To keep people listening for more. So we'll start off with some pretty standard fare. The film had a budget of $9 million, and internationally it made about $57.5 million. So not bad, not a bad profit.
No.
It was released
adjusted or not adjusted for inflation?
not adjusted.
No,
that's
wow.
just
so yeah, that was
back
huge
then.
in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's nuts. That's huge for now, let alone, yeah. It was released in the United States September 29th, 1994. In the top 3 grossing films that year were Forrest Gump, The Lion King, and True Lies. Interesting. So Matt made a comment earlier about how this film is 27 years old, and I had a moment where I was like, it can't be 27 years old. I'm 27 years old. And then I had this feeling of like, oh God, I'm old.
Shut up, Phil. Just shut up. Me and Ryan were just talking about how we feel young still, regardless of when we see old people on TV, and then you come in with a comment like that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I wonder if Muriel's Wedding would have a master's degree unlike me. Anyways, the film holds...
married.
Yeah. The film holds 78% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars. And this is a quote from Roger himself. The film is merciless in its portrait of provincial society, and yet has a huge affection for its misfit survivors. It has a lot of big and little laughs in it, but also a melancholy undercurrent, which reveals itself towards the end of the film in a series of surprises and unexpected developments. The film's good heart keeps it from making fun of Muriel, although there are moments that must have been tempting.
Well done, Roger.
Roger hardly ever, doesn't say something as well as it could be said.
Yeah, man, that's like a wordsmith right there.
I like it.
And then one last review, we had Peter Travers of Rolling Stone call it exuberantly funny, a crowd pleaser that spices a tired formula with genuine feeling. And in the final scenes, when Hogan, the director, dares to let his humor turn edgy, Colette's performance gains in force, and Muriel's Wedding becomes a date you want to keep.
I think he's on to what you were talking about, Matt. It really ramps up the movie. It's a good quality movie, and then I think the ending as we get there pushes it into something a little bit more special.
You know what it made me think about? Not to belabor this episode, but I want to discuss this briefly with you guys. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this done in a satisfying or successful way, where a movie starts in one genre, very comfortably gets through like the first act or two, and then totally shifts into another genre. Like if you had comedy that shifted into full on like morbid horror, something like that, like a dramatic shift, that would be interesting. I can't think of a good example of that aside from perhaps Muriel's Wedding.
Does Cabin in the Woods count?
No, because I think that's comedy horror from the jump.
Yeah.
Sci-fi comedy horror. And it kind of carries the same tone throughout.
Sort of Dusk Till Dawn.
Maybe that's close.
Yeah. That is interesting. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, we can plug it here. Jawheads, I'm sure you guys listening have stuff. So feedback at CinemaJaw.com with them, because I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah. Especially from comedy to drama. Like something that's like really broad comedy funny in the beginning and then gets kind of serious and sad toward the end. I'd like to see that movie.
Something to think on. We're going to dive into some more. Okay, this fact I love. I love and hate at the same time. So apparently ABBA did not give any permission for their music to be used until like 2 weeks before any actual shooting started. So all of the production team was wondering what to do, and they were thinking about changing Muriel's favorite band from ABBA to the Village People, which personally I would what are these groans for? Are you kidding me?
Well, can you name 2 Village People songs?
Besides the
YMCA, Sex Over the Phone, which rules.
How does it even go? Phil, come on.
Sex over the phone.
It's awesome.
How do I not
At
know
the
this?
YMCA.
The Village
but
People,
unfortunately,
I think,
was appropriated by a certain politician who will not be named. But
well, historically, who knows when that was? If listen, I was only 1 year old at the time. My point being, I would have loved the Village People cut. That being said,
I don't know
There's
what they
two
would have been
people.
singing. I don't know what they would have been singing on that karaoke sing. Had to have been YMCA.
could you imagine, like, listen, I appreciate ABBA. I think I'm a little annoyed by ABBA, as we've been talking about how often they appear. Could you just imagine, like, the Mamma Mia, the YMCA musical? That would be, just the costume design alone would be awesome. I think they shit the bed on, like, if I was one of the
At
if I
least
was
we
on the
know there's
production
one
team-
fan out there of the Village People.
no, we know of two. Hey, but Phil, what about like the Bee Gees? Can we compromise and say the Bee Gees?
They're great too. Like I said, I think the Village People are so weird. I mean, ABBA's weird too, but in a different way than the Village People. That I would have, it's like they just seem like people who know that what they're doing is weird and out there with the costumes that they wear on stage. Like it's like Lady Gaga, right? Like, just very weird. They make choices that other performers aren't going to make, and it would have been fun to watch. All
right, I'm gonna give you the point.
Anyways, as we all know, history went the course it did. ABBA was in the film. They received profits from it, which is cool. I didn't know musicians like that got residuals for this kind of like work. And then it turned out to be such an international hit. Ryan mentioned it. It helped ABBA, I don't know what you want to call it, like awaken. And eventually, this was a direct inspiration for the success of Mamma Mia, the Broadway show.
So what you're saying, Phil, is the history book on the shelf, it's always repeating itself?
In this instance, it was doing it for the first time. And then since then, we've had ABBA repeating itself, yes. Here's another fact that was also mentioned. Toni Collette she gained 40 pounds in 7 weeks for this role. She had the help of a dietitian, which is good. I couldn't imagine doing that without a dietitian. I couldn't even imagine doing that with a dietitian. I mean, I can, but not in a
beer and pizza
healthy way.
It's crazy because in general, you think of Toni Collette is
Very
on the
petite.
skinny side, very petite looking. And in this movie, not the case. She really did pack it on.
She did. And that's a bold move, especially so early in her career, you know?
It also brings up questions of the efficacy of whether or not Hollywood should be doing this, but it was the 90s, so...
Everything went.
Yeah. The director, P.J. Hogan, this is also nuts to me. Based Muriel's personality on himself. However, he has said that the actions that Muriel takes were directly inspired by his sister. Apparently, his sister embezzled $15,000 from their father and then disappeared to Sydney to move with a friend of hers. Fascinating. Wish that there was more information on that than there is.
That's got to be out there. We'll look up some interviews.
Crazy.
This one's cool. In the video store where Muriel works, there is a poster for Strictly Ballroom. Billy Hunter, who is Muriel's father in the film, Bill Helsip. Billy Hunter is also in Strictly Ballroom, and he is in the role Barry Fife. So it's like a little callback.
Interesting. Baz Luhrmann, Strictly Ballroom, another Australian. So all makes sense. It's all tied up down there,
That's the one thing we haven't mentioned much, that this is an Australian film.
Mm-hmm.
Just throwing that out there.
Guy Pearce, who, speaking of Australians, was considered for the role of Bryce originally, and I feel like we talk about Guy Pearce a lot on this show. Am I wrong?
He pops up quite a bit, yeah.
He's always awesome. I love him. Memento.
Then, this one is also very cool. There is an unsuspecting super fan of this film who all of us on this Zoom call hold in very high esteem. Ridley Scott has said in a Hollywood Reporter roundtable, this is an exact quote, Muriel's Wedding, I've seen it 6 times, fantastic. It would be the one film I'd save if the world was annihilated.
Wow.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it, Ridley.
That is a bold statement, Ridley Scott. I mean, this was a great movie, but I'm not sure if it's that great a movie. But hey, if you like
I just love that Ridley Scott goes right away to if the world was being annihilated, right? It's not like that's the one movie I would take on a deserted island with me. No, he goes right for the world being annihilated.
Right. And you got to know, like, Ridley Scott's actually imagined it. So when he's writing Aliens, he's thinking, well, where the hell is the copy of Muriel's Wedding?
Hilarious.
Yeah. Then I did also look up. So Best Weddings in CinemaJaw was episode 222. 3 twos.
That long ago.
Matt said, yeah, relatively recently, within the past few years. It was January 19th, 2015.
Good
so
Lord.
A hot minute ago. And as far as I could tell, I obviously didn't listen to the whole episode during this one, but I did.
Who was our
do
guest?
a site search. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. Guest that week was Lauren Fates, also known as Geek Girl Chicago.
Geek Girl, yeah. Remember her.
She's awesome.
But I did, as far as I can tell, and maybe it was like a data entry error, which 2015, I believe, would have fallen on me to have done. Muriel's Wedding is not in there. So to be honest, there's a 50-50 chance. I think that this is still an open discussion. It could have happened and I just didn't enter it, or it could have not happened and I didn't enter it.
Well, I'm going to stick with my guns, Matt, and just say Muriel's Wedding has never been talked about on CinemaJaw before by us or a guest.
All right. Well, I guess I have no way of refuting you, so I'll accept it.
Was that all the research you had for us, Phil?
That's all I got this time around.
All right. Matt, let's wrap this thing up with a movie poster quote. What do you got?
More than just fried prawns, Muriel's Wedding has comedy, hors d'oeuvres, and a dramatic main course. What you
A
got?
lot to chew on there.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah, no pun. Mine, you almost got to sing. You almost got to sing my movie poster quote. It's take a chance on Muriel.
How many jaws would you give this thing, Ryan?
Solid 3 jaws for Muriel's Wedding. I'm at a solid 3 jaws.
I think you're being a little stingy. I'm going 4 jaws. This is a classic.
Wow.
It's a great
4 jaws.
If
That's
we
nice.
did top 10 comedy dramas, this would most certainly be on that list. Most certainly.
You loved it.
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely.
Jawheads, if you have seen Muriel's Wedding and you have Twitter pulled up, shoot us a tweet at CinemaJaw, or you can always email us feedback@cinemajaw.com. If you're a jawhead out there who has not seen Muriel's Wedding, obviously we're recommending 3 jaws from me, 4 from Matt. It is not streaming on any of the big streamers that I could find. I rented mine on Vudu, $2.99. Matt, and any recommendations for the jawheads?
You know what? I've been doing more and more on YouTube these days, so I went ahead and rented it on YouTube. Same price.
Right. So look for it anywhere around there. It's a bargain deal and well worth the $2.99 to rent Muriel's Wedding and celebrate Toni Collette this month of April here on CinemaJaw.
100%. 100%.
All right. That wraps things up. Before we blow out of here, we got to thank our crack research editor and producer, Fill Me In Phil.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Matt, we also got to thank the Jawheads listening.
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Jawheads. Thanks for everyone who is listening, especially our patrons over on Patreon. If you want to get involved in the fun, we have a whole bunch of bonus episodes that we're doing. There's a couple of rewards you can get. Just support the show at patreon.com/CinemaJaw.
Until next week, I'm Ryan, the movie guy.
I'm Matt Kay.
And keep on jawing about the movies.